Okay, let's unpack this. Um, Imagine walking into a meeting, maybe sending a crucial email, or even just, introducing yourself at a networking event, and feeling absolutely confident that every word you say or write, it strikes the perfect professional tone.
Hmm.
That's really our mission today. English isn't just common in the global workplace. It's pretty much the undisputed lingua franca.
Oh, absolutely. For everything. Pitching ideas, navigating deals, even just a simple document request across time zones.
Exactly. But here's the thing, and this is what we want to dig into. While tons of people can communicate in English, getting to that truly professional, impactful communication, that's a whole different skill set.
It really is.
It demands more than just knowing words. It's about having like an acute understanding of the right words, the right tone, and definitely the right cultural context. So your message isn't just understood, but it actually resonates, you know?
Yeah, and it's fascinating how often the real power lies in those subtle shifts. Tiny changes in language, a deep awareness of cultural context. These aren't minor details at all. They're sort of the bedrock that truly elevates your communication, takes it from just functional to genuinely influential.
Right.
So we're moving beyond just, building vocabulary, which is obviously important, foundational even, but it's more about mastering those finer points, the polite nuances, the right levels of formality. Those things dramatically shape how you're perceived professionally.
That's such a good point. The perception piece is huge.
Exactly. We're talking about that critical difference between just being understood and being genuinely respected, between simply getting information across and actually forging strong, lasting professional relationships.
I've seen that so many times, how just a simple shift in phrasing can completely change the dynamic in a room, or even just in an email chain.
Mhm.
And let's be honest, for many of us, especially learners navigating this whole complex landscape, there's that common worry, right? That nagging feeling about striking the wrong note.
The anxiety.
Yeah, like, am I sounding too casual when I need to be formal? Or maybe too direct, too blunt, when actually a softer, more diplomatic approach is what's needed. It's like trying to navigate a really complex labyrinth, but without a map. Especially in those high-stakes moments, a big negotiation, or drafting an email that could really impact your career.
You know what needs to happen.
You know exactly what you want to achieve, yeah. But the exact words, the tone, the structure, that can feel incredibly daunting, and that can lead to those awkward silences, or worse, your message gets completely misinterpreted,
Right.
which can actually impede career progress or even, damage relationships.
And this challenge you're describing, knowing the what, but struggling with the how, it really brings up a critical question, doesn't it? In this world that's just overflowing with information, advice on professional development, how do you distill the truly actionable insights, the things that empower you to communicate effectively, like from day one?
Yeah, cutting through the noise.
Yeah, exactly. Our goal today is to try and cut through some of that information overload. Get right to the core principles, the practical phrases you can actually apply immediately. We don't just want to hand you a list of things to memorize, though. The aim is really to help you understand the why behind these choices, the underlying rationale,
That's key.
because that enables you to adapt your approach intelligently, to all sorts of dynamic business situations rather than just sort of mechanically applying rules.
Precisely. So today we're taking a deep dive into the very practical, but also, I think, profoundly impactful aspects of business English. We'll cover basically everything from making that really stellar first impression with professional introductions
Crucial.
to confidently navigating those tricky conversations in meetings, handling disagreements politely, and even mastering the art of crafting emails that are perfectly polite, but also persuasive.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not stopping there. We'll also zoom out a bit, explore those critical cultural nuances that can honestly make or break your professional interactions, especially on a global stage.
That's so important.
It's meant to be a comprehensive approach, really, designed to equip you with the tools to feel genuinely at ease and, well, powerful in any English-speaking business environment.
And by the close of this deep dive, you won't just have like a collection of ready-made phrases you picked up. Hopefully, you'll have cultivated a deeper understanding of the foundational principles behind professional communication.
Right.
And that understanding, that's what truly empowers you to adapt, to innovate, and really thrive in all sorts of diverse English-speaking environments. You can think of it as a significant shortcut, maybe, to becoming well-informed in professional English, giving you those really satisfying aha moments that transform your confidence from just a hope into something tangible, something consistent, a competence you can rely on.
Fantastic. Okay, let's jump right in then. Our first big topic, mastering professional introductions. That absolutely crucial first impression that really sets the stage for everything else that follows.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you're introducing yourself in a business context, maybe it's a new colleague, a potential client, someone you're meeting for the very first time at a conference, the really common, overly casual way is often just, "Hi, I'm Alex."
We hear it all the time.
Right. And look, in a very informal social setting, that might be perfectly fine. But in a business context, it often just falls short.
It really does.
The core issue, I think, is that it lacks immediate context. It doesn't give the other person enough information to quickly grasp your role, your organization, or maybe how you might potentially connect professionally.
You're making them work for it.
Exactly. You're making them do the work of figuring you out instead of offering that immediate value and clarity. To really make an impact, you want to offer a little more substance right from the get-go.
You're absolutely spot on. Think about the powerful simplicity of an introduction like, "Hi, I'm Alex, and I work in the marketing department at ABC Company."
Clear, concise.
What's truly effective there is how quickly, how efficiently that structure establishes your professional identity and your affiliation. You're immediately giving the other person a clear frame of reference, your name, your specific role, the organization you represent.
Yep.
Boom.
Instantly provides context.
Right. And that makes it far easier for them to maybe ask a relevant follow-up question or even just recall your specific context later when they're sifting through, dozens of new contexts from that event. It's concise, it's professional, and critically, it's informative. It does the work for them.
Right. Or another great example. "Nice to meet you. My name is Lisa, and I'm a project manager at XYZ Tech." Now, you might notice a subtle difference there, but I think it's important, between "I'm Alex" and "My name is Lisa." While both are perfectly acceptable, "My name is Lisa," can sometimes carry a slightly more formal cadence, right? Maybe chosen for specific environments where you want to touch more gravitas or a more deliberate sense of composure.
Yeah, it feels a bit more presented.
It's a very slight distinction in word choice, but it can absolutely be a conscious decision to project a certain level of professionalism right from the outset.
Indeed. That "my name is" construction, it can definitely add a layer of deliberateness. It signals a more considered, maybe more formal approach to the introduction. It implies you are intentionally presenting yourself with a bit more weight, a bit more decorum,
Right.
which can be particularly useful in, say, highly formal settings, or maybe during those initial high-stakes encounters, like a big client pitch or meeting senior executives.
Good point. It projects that sense of composure and respect for the situation.
Exactly. Respect for the context.
Okay, so now let's pivot slightly. We've talked about introducing yourself. What about the equally important skill of how to politely respond when someone introduces themselves to you? We've all been there, or maybe even done it ourselves. A quick monosyllabic,
Yes.
or a really hurried, almost dismissive, "Nice to meet you," as you're turning away.
Guilty as charged, probably at some point.
Right. These responses, well, they're not overtly rude, maybe, but they often lack warmth. They can leave the other person feeling just sort of acknowledged rather than genuinely engaged with.
Like a transaction.
Yeah, and you have a real opportunity here to elevate that initial interaction quite significantly.
And the real takeaway here is how profoundly a warm, genuine response can actually shape the whole interaction that follows. When you use a phrase like, "It's a pleasure to meet you, Alex," you're doing so much more than just acknowledging they exist. The word pleasure itself, it conveys genuine warmth, a positive feeling. It elevates the interaction beyond just, obligatory acknowledgement. It signals respect, positive engagement, and a really welcoming, open tone, which can be incredibly impactful in quickly building rapport.
It feels more sincere.
It does. It suggests you're not just going through the motions, but you're actually interested in the connection, the potential for maybe future interaction.
And then there's the ever-reliable, "Nice to meet you too, Lisa." This one's a solid, very versatile option. Often serves as like a foundational, polite response.
A good default.
Yeah. It strikes a good balance, I think, between warmth and professionalism. It's not overly effusive, not overly casual either. It's polite, it's clear, it's universally understood across pretty much most professional settings. So it's a safe and effective choice when you want to be welcoming, but maybe still maintain a little professional distance.
That's spot on. Think of nice to meet you too as sort of the verbal equivalent of a firm, polite handshake.
Good analogy.
It's universally accepted, never misunderstood. It's a clear gesture of acknowledgement and positive intent, provides a really comfortable, clear entry point for the conversation to move forward. It signals you're receptive to more interaction without maybe overstating any immediate familiarity.
Okay, now let's level up a bit. Let's talk about networking events or maybe larger professional gatherings.
Yeah.
Beyond just that initial hello, how do you keep the conversation flowing? And crucially, how do you show genuine interest in the other person?
Right, because it's not just about stating who you are.
Exactly. It's about demonstrating a sincere curiosity about them. That's what builds connection.
A perfectly acceptable, very direct opener you'll often hear is simply, "So what do you do?"
Pretty standard.
It's straightforward, its intent is immediately clear. Just quickly understand the other person's professional sphere. It's an efficient way to get a quick overview, their role, their company. It serves its purpose, provides a clear path for them to share basic info about their work. It's functional, maybe a little blunt sometimes, but functional.
But if you want to invite a more detailed response, maybe a richer response, one that genuinely shows a deeper level of interest and often leads to much more meaningful conversations, you could opt for something like, tell me a little about your role at your company.
Yes, and this touches on a critical point. How can you subtly encourage someone to share more without sounding like you're prying or being intrusive?
Right, that's the trick.
The phrasing, "tell me a little about your role at your company," is just an excellent example of this nuanced approach. It's an open-ended invitation. It shifts the dynamic from just a quick factual exchange, "I'm a project manager," to potentially a narrative one. "Well, I manage projects focused on X, and currently we're tackling Y."
Opens the door wider.
Exactly. It signals a greater depth of interest than just, "What do you do?" It encourages the person to elaborate, maybe share insights into their responsibilities, their challenges, perhaps even a bit about their professional journey. And that, in turn, gives you more substantive material to build a truly engaging, memorable conversation. You move beyond just superficial pleasantries.
It fosters a connection.
It absolutely fosters a connection by inviting them to share a part of their professional story.
So the key takeaway here seems unequivocally clear. First impressions are fundamentally built on clarity, genuine respect, and a demeanor that's both professional and approachable.
All three are needed.
You're providing enough information about yourself to be easily understood, you're demonstrating sincere interest in the other person, and you're setting a positive, inviting tone for whatever interaction follows.
You're essentially making it easy for the other person to engage with you, reducing friction.
Exactly, making it easy to connect. Okay, next up, let's tackle one of the most, let's face it, high-pressure environments in professional communication meetings.
Definitely high pressure for many.
Yeah, this is often where many learners feel the most pressure to perform, to contribute effectively, and to navigate sometimes complex, fast-moving discussions. Now, a really common habit when sharing an opinion is to start with, "I think."
Ubiquitous.
Right. And look, it's not inherently wrong, but it can sometimes sound a little tentative, maybe even diminish the authority of your contribution slightly. The goal is usually to convey confidence and conviction in your ideas.
Spot on. When you use a phrase like, "in my opinion, we should focus on," you are explicitly framing your statement as a well-considered viewpoint. It's not just a fleeting thought bubble.
Right, signals more weight.
Exactly. This approach invites discussion, invites consideration, rather than asserting a fact that might sort of shut down dialogue.
It's direct, yes, but it's also polite. It signals that you're offering a carefully formed perspective, which allows for that collaborative exploration of ideas. It just conveys a sense of thoughtfulness behind what you're saying.
I like that. Or another really good one. I'd suggest that this one feels truly versatile, especially for proposing actions or solutions.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
Analyzing, I'd suggest, it really reveals its inherent power as a collaborative proposal.
Yeah.
It's not a command, it's not an imperative.
It's an offering, really. A pathway forward, inviting others to consider it, maybe align with your idea. Think about all the scenarios where this is usable. Proposing a new strategy to leadership, offering a solution during a brainstorming session, gently suggesting a change in direction for a project that's maybe going off track.
Yeah, tons of uses.
For instance, instead of a blunt, "we need to change our marketing plan," which can put people on the defensive.
Right.
You could articulate, "Okay, given the recent market shifts, I'd suggest that we pivot our marketing strategy to, say, target a younger demographic." See the
That's
difference?
more collaborative.
It positions your idea as a collaborative step, fostering buy-in rather than potentially triggering resistance.
And then there's that more inclusive framing from my perspective, I believe.
Yes. And the broader implication here, what's fascinating, is how, from my perspective, allows you to articulate a really strong conviction or belief while inherently acknowledging that others might possess different viewpoints.
Yeah.
And that is so crucial for collaborative environments where you want diverse ideas.
Makes it safer for others.
It makes your statement more inclusive, significantly less confrontational. For example, maybe you're discussing potential bottlenecks in a project. You could say, from my perspective, I believe the biggest challenge right now lies in scaling our existing infrastructure.
Okay.
This clearly states your conviction, but it simultaneously opens the door wide for colleagues to share their perspectives on the same challenge. It invites a richer, multifaceted discussion. It promotes, you could say, intellectual humility without diminishing the strength of your own idea.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, now what about agreeing professionally? The pitfall here is often just a simple, maybe unenthusiastic yes, or a quick nod while you're looking at your notes.
The drive-by agreement.
Yeah. You want to show genuine agreement, active engagement. Make the other person feel truly heard and validated. That really strengthens team dynamics.
Absolutely. When you actually say the words, I completely agree with you, the power embedded in that word completely is immense.
It adds emphasis.
Huge emphasis and conviction. It leaves absolutely no ambiguity about your alignment with their point. This is far more than just a casual nod. It's a full endorsement of their insight. And that can be incredibly empowering for the speaker, right? It validates their insight, encourages them, and maybe others, to contribute further.
And a phrase like, that's a great point, seems deceptively simple, but it's remarkably effective, isn't it?
Oh, hugely effective. Because it not only signifies immediate agreement, but maybe more importantly, it actively validates the other person's contribution.
Right. It praises the idea itself.
Exactly. It acknowledges the quality of their insight, the effort they put in, and that, in turn, fosters positive team dynamics and encourages them and others to contribute even more insightful points later on. Imagine a colleague shares a really complex analysis, responding with, wow, that's a great point, I hadn't actually considered it from that angle, builds instant rapport. It encourages a deeper level of thinking across the whole team.
It transforms agreement into appreciation, really.
Well said, yes.
Now, for those times when you want to actually build on an idea, contribute something further rather than just simply agreeing, you can effectively use, I see your point, and I'd like to add.
This phrase is a masterclass in active listening and constructive collaboration. Let's break it down. It begins by demonstrating you've listened carefully, you've absorbed their point. I see your point. That builds that crucial bridge of understanding first.
Acknowledgement first.
Yes. Then and I'd like to add, gracefully allows you to introduce your own supplementary insight or suggestion. It makes the discussion richer. You're moving beyond simple agreement into collective problem solving. For instance, I see your point regarding the budget constraints for this quarter, and I'd like to add that maybe we could proactively explore grant opportunities for next year to offset some of those costs.
So you're not just confirming, you're actively contributing to the solution.
Precisely. You're building together.
Okay, now for what many consider the Mount Everest of professional communication. How to disagree without being confrontational, disrespectful, or just plain rude.
The big one.
Yeah, that instinct to blurt out, no, that's wrong, can be really strong sometimes, especially if you feel passionate. But it's almost never productive in a professional setting. It just shuts down dialogue instantly.
Instantly. Instead of that blunt negation, which honestly can feel like a personal attack,
It often does.
consider the profound impact of, I see your point, but I have a slightly different perspective. Let's break down its components, the psychology. I see your point, again, immediately validates their contribution. Signals you've heard them, understood them. This disarms potential defensiveness right away.
Crucial first step.
Then the but signals a difference is coming. But notice how I have a slightly different perspective softens the disagreement considerably. It's about presenting your view as an alternative, maybe an additional angle, rather than a direct refutation or correction. This approach maintains that professional rapport, keeps the conversation open, constructive.
Can you give an example?
Sure, if a colleague proposes a top line that seems, well, unrealistic, instead of that's impossible, you might diplomatically respond, okay, I see your point on aiming for a 2-week turnaround, but I have a slightly different perspective on the resources required for task X, which might unfortunately push that closer to 3 weeks. See? Polite but clear.
Much better. Okay, another incredibly useful and respectful option is, that's an interesting idea, but I think we should also consider.
Yes. Starting with, that's an interesting idea, immediately shows respect for their contribution. It acknowledges their effort, their thought process, even if you don't fully agree.
Validation, yeah.
That initial validation is key. Then, but I think we should also consider, introduces an alternative while keeping the tone consultative, collaborative. This isn't about shutting down their idea. It's about expanding the discussion, exploring other angles, inviting a more comprehensive view. You're effectively saying, okay, your idea has merit, and let's also look at the full picture together.
Like, that's an interesting idea to target a completely new market segment, but I think we should also consider the potential regulatory hurdles in that region before we commit significant resources.
Perfect example. It's about additive thinking, bringing in other crucial factors.
And finally, a very direct yet still quite polite way to introduce a counterargument is, I understand what you're saying, but I believe.
Very similar to the previous examples, that opening "I understand what you're saying" builds that critical bridge of comprehension. It shows you've processed their argument, you're not dismissing it out of hand.
Empathy.
Exactly. Then, "but I believe" allows you to present your counterargument as a deeply held conviction, perhaps, or a well-reasoned stance rather than a personal attack. And this really raises that important question. How do you maintain professional rapport, keep that collaborative spirit alive, while introducing a counterargument? These phrases are just masterclasses in doing exactly that.
They really are tools for constructive debate.
They allow for rigorous intellectual debate without letting disagreement spiral into personal animosity. Imagine a discussion about project prioritization. Look, I understand what you're saying about prioritizing Project A for immediate revenue, but I believe Project B, though maybe a longer-term investment, has a stronger strategic advantage for securing significant market share down the road. Clear, strong, but respectful.
That makes sense. Okay, before we move on from meetings, let's quickly touch on another vital aspect. Asking questions effectively. It's not just about offering your opinion. It's about actively shaping the discussion through smart inquiry.
Absolutely. Asking the right questions in the right way is such a powerful tool for professional engagement. It shows you're listening, thinking critically, and guiding the conversation. For example, instead of just stating a problem you see, you might ask, could you perhaps elaborate on the potential risks associated with that particular approach? Exactly. It's a clarifying question. It shows you're engaged, thinking critically, not simply challenging for the sake of it. Or, to probe a bit deeper maybe, what data specifically led us to that conclusion?
Seeking evidence?
Yes, but seeking evidence without sounding accusatory. Another really excellent approach is to open up possibilities. Have we considered alternative solutions that might address, say, the X issue more directly?
Invites broader thinking.
Precisely. And notice the language here, it's always consultative. Using modals like could, might, have we considered, it fosters an environment of shared exploration rather than feeling like an interrogation.
So the key takeaway from this whole section, it feels like, is that professional meeting communication is really about contributing thoughtfully, fostering genuine collaboration, and meticulously maintaining respect, even when viewpoints differ strongly.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
It's about building ideas together, refining strategies through that constructive dialogue, and making sure every voice feels heard and valued.
That's the goal.
Okay, now let's transition from spoken words in meetings to the written word, specifically business emails. In today's world, emails are often, the primary written record of our professional interactions. And their tone, their clarity, their professionalism, it impacts perception significantly.
Massively. They're your digital footprint.
Exactly. And many learners really grapple with finding that crucial balance. You don't want to be too direct, which can sound abrupt or demanding, but you also don't want to be overly polite, which can sometimes come across as maybe unconfident or vague or even a bit indirect, making it hard to understand what you actually need.
It's a tightrope walk sometimes.
It really is. And this balance is so critical because your email tone can genuinely influence how quickly you get a response, whether your request gets prioritized, and even just how your colleagues and clients perceive your overall professionalism and attention to detail.
You're absolutely right. Emails aren't just messages. They are, as you said, digital fingerprints of your professional self. They often serve as that initial point of contact, they become a record of decisions made, and they're definitely a reflection of your organizational culture, too.
That's true.
A well-crafted email, it can speed things up, foster goodwill, reinforce your reputation as someone who is meticulous, respectful, professional. Conversely, a poorly worded email, maybe a discourteous one, it can create unnecessary friction, huge misunderstandings, or even damage really crucial relationships. It truly is a delicate balance. Conciseness, clarity, and courtesy, all three.
Okay, let's start right at the very beginning. Polite greetings. There's a distinct spectrum of formality here, isn't there? And choosing the right one immediately sets the tone for your entire message.
Oh, definitely. For formal emails, especially when it's your very first contact with someone, or maybe you're addressing a higher up, or communicating with external partners you don't know well, Dear Mr. Johnson or Dear Ms. Patel, is not just appropriate, it's often essential.
Feels like the default safe choice.
It is. It's universally accepted in formal business contexts. It immediately signals a respectful, official tone right from the outset. Removes any ambiguity about the professional, serious nature of your communication. Think of it as the default for unknown recipients, or for very important, perhaps sensitive, correspondence. And this also applies when you know someone's preferred title, like Dear Dr. Lee or Dear Director Chen. Using the correct title shows respect.
But once a rapport has been established, or maybe you're in a less formal company culture, you might quite appropriately switch to something like, Hi, Lisa, right?
Yes, and what's truly illuminating here is how that choice of greeting immediately signals the perceived relationship and the expected level of formality between the two of you.
Right, it's a cue.
Hi first name is perfectly appropriate, very common, once you have an established working relationship and you operate within a more casual, collaborative, professional environment. However, you do need to exercise a degree of caution here. Definitely don't use this for initial contact with an unknown recipient, especially someone very senior, or in a culture where formality is strictly maintained.
Good point. Don't assume informality.
Never assume. The transition from Dear Mr. M's to Hi first name should ideally follow cues you've received from the other person's communication style, or just be consistent with the established company culture and internal communication norms. Getting this wrong can inadvertently imply a familiarity that isn't yet earned, or might even be culturally inappropriate, which can start things off on the wrong foot.
Okay, so after the greeting, you need to clearly state your reason for writing. Get straight to the point, respect their time, but, and this is crucial, do it politely. Avoid any hint of abruptness or demanding language.
Yes. When you write, I'm writing to follow up on,
Mm-hmm.
that phrase follow up is highly efficient.
Implies prior contact.
Exactly. It implies previous communication, maybe a shared understanding, or an ongoing matter. It makes your email immediately contextual and purposeful. For instance, Hi David, I'm writing to follow up on our discussion yesterday regarding the new project proposal and just wanted to confirm the next steps.
Okay.
It's direct, yes, but it acknowledges a prior interaction, showing continuity. This phrase is excellent for reinforcing accountability or just keeping a project moving forward.
Now for something maybe a little softer, perhaps for a less urgent matter, or when you're simply checking in on progress, I wanted to check in regarding. Feels like a particularly good choice.
It is. Check-in is inherently softer, more consultative than follow-up. It conveys a less demanding tone. It's excellent for status updates, gentle reminders, or when you're inquiring about something that isn't, imminently time-sensitive. For example, Hi Sarah, I just wanted to check in regarding the status of the vendor contract and see if you require any further information from my end.
Gentle nudge.
Exactly. It conveys a proactive yet polite approach, suitable for keeping those lines of communication open without exerting undue pressure. Helps maintain a collegial atmosphere even when deadlines might be looming.
And if you're making a specific request, framing it with, I'd like to request some information about, is just far superior to any kind of demanding imperative like, send me.
Oh, absolutely. I'd like to request is polite, it's specific, and it's impeccably clear about your need, but frames it courteously. It completely avoids any demanding language. It frames your need as a courteous request, not an order. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, these opening lines are fundamentally about respecting the recipient's time and their autonomy,
Right.
while still clearly communicating your intent. So instead of a terse, send me the data, you'd say, Hi Mark, I'd like to request some information about the latest sales figures for the quarter, specifically regarding Q2 performance, if you have that available.
Much better.
It sets a collaborative, respectful tone from the very first sentence. And that significantly increases the likelihood of getting a prompt and positive response. It signals you value their contribution and their time.
Okay, finally, ending your email politely. Just as crucial as starting it well, right? It's your last opportunity to leave that lasting, polite, and professional impression. And it often needs to go beyond just a simple thanks in many contexts.
Definitely. I appreciate your help is a genuine, concise, and highly effective expression of gratitude.
Simple but effective.
Very. It's always well received because it directly acknowledges the effort or assistance the recipient provided, or maybe even assistance you anticipate they will provide. This reinforces a positive relationship, encourages future cooperation. It's a direct way to say thank you that feels sincere and professional.
And if you're waiting for a reply or waiting for an action from them, looking forward to your response is an excellent way to close without sounding impatient or demanding.
Yes, this phrase is a subtle yet powerful tool. It creates a clear expectation for a reply or an action, but without being demanding.
Sets an expectation politely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's anticipatory and polite. It signals that you not only expect, but also welcome their feedback or their future action. For instance, if you've asked a question that needs their input, ending with, "Looking forward to your response," gently encourages them to get back to you in a timely manner. It doesn't sound pushy. It just conveys continued engagement.
And then, the universally recognized standard professional closing. Best regards, your name.
This raises that important question again. How do you end an email both politely and effectively across almost any professional context imaginable? Best regards is truly a reliable workhorse here.
The go-to.
It really is. It's a standard, universally appropriate professional closing, suitable for almost any business context from your first contact to ongoing correspondence. Now, contrast that with more casual closings like just thanks or maybe cheers, which, while they might be appropriate in very specific informal internal settings or with close colleagues,
Right.
they might be far too informal for initial communications, highly formal contexts, or with recipients you don't know well, especially clients or senior management. Best regards maintains that consistent level of professionalism right from your greeting all the way to your signature.
Are there other good alternatives?
Sure. Depending on the context, you could also use sincerely, which is generally considered more formal than best regards, or kind regards, which is often seen as slightly less formal than best regards. Maybe good for ongoing rapport once you know someone a bit better. And of course, simply thank you can be a perfectly fine closing if the entire email was purely a request for something. Context is key.
Good options. So the key takeaway here, really, is that every single part of a business email, from the subject line you choose, the greeting, the body's tone, the clarity of your request, right down to the closing, profoundly contributes to your professional image.
Every single element matters.
Politeness is paramount, absolutely. But it needs to be meticulously combined with clarity, conciseness, and efficiency to be truly impactful. It's about crafting that comprehensive professional voice on paper.
Well put, your voice on paper.
Okay, now let's get into some highly actionable do's and don'ts. These apply to pretty much every facet of your everyday business communication, written or spoken. These are practical tips designed for immediate improvement, things you can start doing right away to refine your professional interactions. First, let's talk about the do's, the best practices for cultivating professionalism.
All right. Do number one, and it's a big one, speak clearly and confidently. What's truly remarkable here is that even the most perfectly phrased sentence, packed with brilliant vocabulary, loses significant impact if it's delivered hesitantly or mumbled or in a flat monotone.
Delivery matters.
Confidence amplifies clarity. It lends weight and authority to your words. This isn't just about the words you choose, it's profoundly about your vocal delivery, your articulation, making sure you're pronouncing words clearly, the appropriate pace of your speech, not too fast, not too slow, and your volume, loud enough to be heard easily. A clear, steady, audible voice projects authority, it projects conviction, it projects professionalism. It makes your message resonate far more effectively with your audience, whoever they are.
It makes you sound like you know what you're talking about, even if you're nervous inside.
Exactly. Imagine explaining a complex new company policy. If you mumble or rush through it, even if the content is 100% correct, the message gets diluted, comprehension suffers, and people might doubt the policy itself.
Good point. Okay, and do number two, which we touched on slightly earlier, but I think it really bears repeating with more emphasis. Use polite phrases like, "Could you please?" instead of those direct imperatives like, "Give me."
This principle is absolutely fundamental. Foundational, really, for fostering a collaborative and respectful work environment. The imperative form, like, give me the report now, just sounds demanding. It sounds authoritative in a negative way and can even come across as aggressive.
Puts people's backs up.
It does. It leaves no room for the other person's agency or their existing workload. Conversely, the interrogative form, could you please, actively invites cooperation. It frames your request as a question, giving the other person a sense of choice, making them feel respected, and that significantly increases their willingness to actually help you.
Think about the difference in impact.
It's huge. Consider the stark difference. Give me the report now. Versus, hi, Sarah, could you please send me the report when you have a moment? The impact on team dynamics, the likelihood of a positive, timely response, and just your overall professional report, it's immense. It's such a small change in syntax, just a few words, but it generates a monumental shift in impact and how you're perceived as a colleague, as a team player.
And this applies everywhere. Asking a colleague for help, requesting action from someone who reports to you, even delegating a task.
Everywhere. Would you be able to take care of X is always, always better than do X. Always.
Okay, our third essential do is to listen carefully and respond professionally. Now, this might sound really obvious, but truly active listening is a skill that, frankly, many people overlook in the rush of daily business.
It's easily overlooked. And if we connect this to the broader picture of effective communication, active listening is truly the bedrock, the foundation upon which everything else is built. It's not just about passively hearing the words someone is saying. It's about diligently working to understand the speaker's deeper meaning, their intent, maybe their underlying concerns, sometimes even their emotional state.
Reading between the lines a bit.
Exactly. When you listen actively, you can then tailor your professional responses much more appropriately. You show that you genuinely value the other person's input, which cultivates trust and respect like nothing else. For example, if a client is describing a really multifaceted problem they're facing, truly listening allows you to not only offer a viable technical solution, but also to acknowledge their frustration or their concern about the issue.
Addressing the emotion, too.
Yes, and that builds trust and rapport profoundly. Your response then becomes a bespoke solution tailored to their specific problem and their emotional state, not just some generic answer pulled from a playbook. And that makes it far more impactful and memorable. It demonstrates empathy alongside strategic thinking.
That's powerful. Okay, now for the don'ts, those common pitfalls that can severely undermine your professionalism, even if you have the best intentions. Don't number one, use too much slang. Saying something like, hey, dude, what's up, to your boss or a client is definitely not professional in those business settings.
Definitely not. Slang is problematic in a business context for several crucial reasons. Firstly, it can be easily misunderstood, right? Especially across different cultural backgrounds or even different generations within the same culture.
What's cool to one group is baffling to another.
Precisely. What's common slang in one region or among a specific age group might be completely foreign or worse, inadvertently offensive elsewhere. Secondly, it often just sounds unprofessional. It can signal a lack of seriousness, maybe a lack of attention to detail, or even a lack of respect for the formality of the business environment. It can create an unnecessary barrier to clear, formal communication. Now, while some modern, highly relaxed workplaces, maybe tech startups, might embrace a certain level of informality,
True.
it's always safer and more widely accepted to err on the side of formality, particularly when you're communicating with external partners, clients, or superiors you don't know very well. It's about code switching.
Adapting your language.
Exactly. Adapting your language to suit the context. And in business, generally speaking, formal or standard professional English is the default code you should start with.
Okay. Don't number two, be too direct or blunt. We talked about requests, but this applies more broadly. Instead of blurting out, I need this now, which can sound incredibly abrupt.
Panicked, even.
Yeah. Opt for something like, could you perhaps send this to me by the end of the day?
Yes, this reiterates that vital concept, the art of softening requests and delivering information politely even when it's urgent. I need this now implies urgency, which might be real, but the phrasing can sound aggressive, demanding, and really dismissive of the other person's existing workload or priorities.
Could definitely breed resentment.
It can.
Well-
Could you send this to me by the end of the day? Is equally clear about your deadline, but it masterfully frames it as a polite request with a precise time frame. It's assertive, yes, but without being abrasive. It maintains professionalism and respect for your colleagues' autonomy. It explicitly shows you value their time and their willingness to help you, even under pressure.
And this applies to more than just requests, right? Like giving feedback.
Absolutely. Instead of a blunt, "Your report has several errors," which just makes someone defensive, you could try, "Thanks for sending the report over. I've reviewed it, and I'd like to suggest just a few areas for refinement before we finalize it."
Much more constructive.
It's about being clear without being cutting, focusing on improvement, not just criticism.
Okay, and finally, a really important don't. Don't ignore small talk. This is something many learners, especially maybe those from cultures that highly prioritize directness and efficiency, might inadvertently overlook or even dismiss as, wasted time.
Let's just get down to business.
Exactly. But in many, many business cultures, starting an interaction with a polite greeting or a brief, friendly question is absolutely essential for building relationships. It's not optional stuff.
This raises that really important question. What role does seemingly unrelated conversation actually play in the grand scheme of professional success? And the answer is profound. It's often the crucial bridge to building trust and fostering stronger working relationships.
It's the social lubricant.
Precisely. Small talk isn't wasted time. It's indispensable relationship building. It allows you to find common ground, establish rapport, show that you see your colleagues or clients as complex individuals, not just, transactional entities you need something from. Think about common examples. How was your weekend? Did you catch the game last night? Planning any travel for the holidays soon? Or any exciting plans for the upcoming long weekend?
Simple, safe topics.
Exactly. These brief, informal exchanges humanize the interaction. They create a comfortable atmosphere. They build a foundational connection that can make future, more substantive business discussions much smoother and more productive. In many cultures, jumping straight into the business agenda without this social preamble is considered abrupt, maybe even rude. It's the subtle art of connecting before you start doing business, building the relationship first.
So the key takeaway here really seems to be that professionalism is deeply embedded in the details. It's in the specific phrases you consciously choose, the way you deliver them vocally, and your acute awareness of those social and cultural cues.
All those little things add up.
They really do. Small, intentional changes in these areas can make an enormous difference in how effectively you communicate and how positively you're perceived in the professional world. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and frankly, I think truly crucial for anyone working internationally.
Agreed. This is key.
Because while all the English phrases we've discussed are undeniably important, understanding the underlying cultural context in which those phrases are used and, importantly, interpreted is absolutely critical. Business English isn't some single uniform entity, is it? It's a living, breathing language that adapts and shifts profoundly across different global cultures, like a chameleon changing its colors depending on the branch it's on.
That's a great analogy. And what's truly striking here is how deeply culture permeates and influences communication styles. It's not just about what you say, but critically, how it's said, and perhaps even more importantly, how it's interpreted by the recipient based on their own cultural lens.
Perception again.
Exactly. A perfectly polite phrase in one culture might unfortunately be perceived as weak or maybe overly formal or even inadvertently rude in another. This additional layer of cultural intelligence, that's what genuinely transforms your communication from merely functional to profoundly effective, impactful, and respectful on a global stage. It's truly the difference between just being heard and being truly understood, valued, and trusted.
Let's dive into some examples. Let's start with the United States. In American workplaces, generally speaking, direct communication is valued, often to a surprising degree compared to many other cultures. People are often encouraged to share their opinions quite openly, even up the chain of command, usually in the spirit of efficiency and transparency.
Indeed. For instance, in an American business meeting, it wouldn't be unusual for an employee to confidently state something like, "I strongly believe this new approach will significantly increase our sales by 20% in the next quarter."
Quite assertive.
Yes, there's a high cultural value placed on clear, assertive opinions, even when those opinions might challenge a prevailing view or a boss's idea. The focus tends to be on presenting a logical argument, maybe backing it up with data if possible, and contributing constructively. This directness is often perceived internally as efficient, honest, transparent, prioritizing clarity over maybe more subtle nuance. It reflects what anthropologists call a low-context culture, where most of the meaning is conveyed through the explicit verbal messages, not reliant on shared history or unspoken cues.
But here's the interesting paradox. Even with that preference for directness, Americans often use various softeners quite liberally to maintain politeness and a sense of collaboration. It's fascinating, isn't it? They want directness, but they also really value being agreeable and liked.
It truly is a subtle balancing act. So you might frequently hear phrases alongside that directness like, well, I think we might want to consider another strategy, or, would it be possible to perhaps adjust the timeline slightly?
Softening the edges.
Precisely. If we connect this to the broader picture of American communication, that inherent directness is frequently mitigated, softened, by these phrases specifically to foster an environment of open yet respectful dialogue. They signal flexibility, a willingness to collaborate, respect for the other person's input. They ensure that direct feedback or suggestions don't come across as overly aggressive, rigid, or dictatorial. These softeners act as a crucial social cushion, allowing for candor without causing unnecessary offense or shutting people down.
And small talk is not just common, it's often pretty much expected in the US, right? Before a formal meeting kicks off, or even just bumping into someone in the hallway, people frequently engage in light conversation. Weekends, hobbies, sports.
Absolutely. Like, hey, did you catch the game last night? Or how was your trip to New York? This deeply underscores the vital social function of small talk in the U.S. It acts as that essential social lubricant. It serves multiple purposes: breaking the initial ice, finding common ground or shared interests, and fundamentally establishing a human connection before you dive into the business agenda.
Building rapport first.
Yes, it's about fostering a comfortable, collaborative atmosphere, which then, paradoxically, often facilitates smoother and more productive business discussions later on. It's rarely seen as a waste of time, more like an essential, often unwritten part of relationship building in that culture. Ignoring it, jumping straight to business, can sometimes be perceived as aloof, maybe even a bit rude, and can actually hinder the development of strong professional relationships.
Okay, now let's contrast that quite sharply with the United Kingdom, where people tend to be significantly more indirect, generally speaking, yet maintain an exceptionally high degree of politeness, often through understatement.
Yes, in British business culture, direct confrontation is generally avoided like the plague. Instead of a blunt, that's wrong, or I disagree, you're far more likely to hear very nuanced, understated statements. Things like, I see your point, but I just wonder if there's perhaps another way we might approach this. Or maybe, that's certainly an interesting perspective, though we might need to consider another factor, perhaps.
Very gentle.
Extremely. These phrases are meticulously designed to allow for disagreement without appearing overtly confrontational. There's a high value placed on maintaining harmony and using understated communication. It's often about gently hinting at alternatives, subtly suggesting other considerations, rather than stating firm opposition, which could easily be perceived as impolite or overtly assertive in that context. It's a manifestation of their preference for subtlety, politeness, and avoiding causing awkwardness, even when challenging ideas.
And in emails, British professionals often employ very polite phrases that honestly might sound almost overly formal or even a bit lengthy to someone from a more direct culture, like the US.
Precisely. You'll frequently encounter greetings like, I hope this email finds you well, which is quite standard there, or requests framed very courteously like, would you be so kind as to send me the report when you have a moment?
Sounds very formal.
It might sound lengthy or excessively formal to someone from a more direct, low-context culture, yes. But these are quintessential hallmarks of British business communication. And this raises that important question again. How does a particular culture master the art of balancing politeness with crystal clear communication? British English provides excellent examples of achieving both in their way. These phrases are deeply ingrained, universally perceived within the UK as respectful, proper, demonstrating a high regard for the recipient and the formality of the professional exchange. Even if they add a few extra words, that politeness is paramount. It's a cultural emphasis on courtesy and, perhaps, tradition.
Okay, let's shift continents again, over to Japan. The emphasis on profound respect, hierarchy, and maintaining group harmony, that concept of wa, is absolutely central to their business culture, which means, as many people know, you will very rarely, if ever, hear someone say a direct no.
That's entirely accurate. In place of a direct refusal, which is often seen as impolite, potentially aggressive, and crucially, can cause loss of face for either the person refusing or the person being refused.
A key concept. Wow.
They might employ incredibly indirect phrases. Things like, that might be a bit difficult. Or perhaps, we will certainly think about it very carefully. There are deep cultural reasons for this avoidance of direct negation. It's all about preserving harmony, showing deference, avoiding discomfort. These phrases allow for a gentle refusal or maybe a deferral of the decision without causing a direct confrontation or breaking that crucial social harmony.
So you really have to read between the lines.
Absolutely crucial. As an external communicator, you must learn to read between the lines and understand that these very indirect statements often signify a negative answer, or at least a significant obstacle. This is a prime example of a high-context culture in action.
Where meaning is implied.
Exactly. Meaning is often derived from shared understanding, nonverbal cues, the relationship between the speakers, rather than just the explicit verbal messages. In such environments, American-style directness can actually be seen as impolite or unsophisticated because it assumes the other person lacks the context or nuance to understand subtle cues.
And their business card etiquette, the Meiji exchange, is incredibly ritualized and profoundly important, isn't it? It's far more than just swapping contact details like we might do in the West.
Oh, worlds apart. When exchanging business cards Meishi in Japan, it's a profound, highly ritualized act. It signifies respect and marks the formal initiation of a professional relationship. You typically use both hands to meticulously present your card and receive the other person's card, ensuring the text faces the recipient so they can read it immediately.
Showing respect for their identity.
Precisely. You then take a moment to carefully look at the card, read the person's name and title, maybe make a brief, respectful comment on it or their company. Then, you respectfully place it on the table in front of you during the meeting, often arranged in order of seniority of the people present. Critically, you never just glance at it and immediately shove it into your back pocket or scribble notes on it in front of them.
Major faux pas.
Huge. This entire act is a profound symbol of respect for the individual and for the relationship being established. It acknowledges their identity, their status, and treats them and their professional representation with the utmost care. This seemingly simple act becomes a highly ritualized demonstration of deep respect and serious professional intention. It really lays the groundwork for trust.
Fascinating. Okay, let's hop over to France. Here, there's often a distinct appreciation for intellectual discussion, logical argument, and even respectful debate, perhaps more so than in Anglo-Saxon cultures.
Yes, French professionals often genuinely enjoy and even expect a rigorous debate of ideas in meetings. It's generally not considered rude to challenge an idea, sometimes quite forcefully, provided it's done logically, with well-reasoned arguments, and with underlying respect for the individual presenting the idea.
The focus is on the idea, not the person.
Exactly. You might hear things like, I must respectfully disagree because based on our latest market data, that assumption isn't fully supported. Or maybe that's certainly an interesting approach, but have we carefully considered the potential long-term implications for our brand reputation if we proceed? If we connect this to the bigger picture, debating ideas vigorously is frequently how French professionals arrive at robust, well-vetted decisions. It's seen as a process of intellectual refinement through constructive friction.
Testing the idea's strength.
Precisely. They place a high value on rhetoric, on the intellectual rigor of a well-argued point. And challenging ideas is often interpreted as a sign of deep engagement and critical thinking, not as personal animosity. It's about stress testing the idea to make it better.
Now, something vital to be aware of if you're doing business in France. Business lunches. Very common, often long, but there's a particular etiquette around them that differs significantly from, say, a quick working lunch in the U.S.
Absolutely. Meetings very often happen over lunch in France, and it's a significant cultural nuance that discussing serious business before the meal properly ends is sometimes considered quite impolite.
The meal itself is important.
Very. French culture places a high value on gastronomy, on the pleasure of eating, and on social interaction as a primary means of building rapport. People generally take their time over meals, savoring the food and the conversation. This raises that important question again. How do different cultures draw the line between social interaction and formal business? In France, the dining table often serves as that crucial social bridge.
Relationship first, then business.
Often, yes. The lunch itself is an important ritual designed to build rapport, trust, and personal connection first. Serious business discussions are typically reserved for after the main course has been cleared, perhaps over coffee, or once a certain level of social comfort and camaraderie has been well established. This indicates that the relationship-building aspect is prioritized, given its full due, before diving into the purely transactional or business-focused aspects. It's an investment in the relationship itself, not just a refueling stop.
That's a really important distinction. Okay,
Correct.
so we've seen these diverse examples. Now let's quickly highlight some of the most common cultural misunderstandings that learners often stumble into when they inadvertently apply their own native cultural norms in an English-speaking business context. These can lead to significant friction, right?
Oh, absolutely. And often with the best intentions, which makes it tricky. A huge one is the direct, literal translation of expressions from your mother tongue. We touched on this, but it's worth reiterating. For example, in some cultures, it's perfectly normal and polite to use a direct imperative like, give me the report. But in English, as we've hammered home, this sounds incredibly rude. It's that demanding imperative tone, implying a lack of respect. What's truly eliminating here is how often politeness in English is conveyed not through literal translation, but by adapting to the target language's specific idiomatic expressions of courtesy.
Using the culturally appropriate polite forms.
Exactly. So instead of literally translating, you'd use the English polite form. Could you possibly send me the report when you have a moment? Another common error is literally translating a general greeting. How are you doing? From some languages might come out literally as, are you well? In English, which sounds overly formal, maybe a bit stilted, or could even imply you're concerned about their health rather than just offering a casual, polite greeting. These small linguistic choices carry significant cultural weight and can sound off.
Another pervasive misunderstanding, I think, is not grasping the different cultural concepts of time. We've touched on this a bit with France and maybe Japan, but these concepts vary so widely across the globe and can have profound practical implications for deadlines and meetings.
You're absolutely right. Consider, for instance, the stark difference you find in Germany. Punctuality there is incredibly important, almost sacred. If a meeting is scheduled for 9 a.m., people expect you to be there, seated, prepared, probably before 9 a.m.
Not 9.01.
Definitely not 9.01. Lateness, even just a few minutes, can be perceived as disrespectful, disorganized, or a clear sign of unreliability. This is characteristic of what we call monochronic cultures, where time is seen as linear, segmented, tangible, something to be managed precisely. But then you go to some polychronic cultures, maybe parts of Latin America like Spain or Brazil or the Middle East. Meetings might often start a bit later, and a few minutes delay is far more acceptable, even expected sometimes. Relationships and fluid interaction might be prioritized over rigid adherence to schedules.
Time feels more flexible.
Exactly. Time is seen as more fluid, more multifaceted, allowing for multiple things to happen concurrently. Now, if we connect this to the broader picture of global business, understanding these different cultural time concepts can literally save you from missed deadlines, damaged professional relationships, or just the constant frustration of perceiving others as unreliable when they're simply operating on a different cultural clock. It's about respecting different rhythms of work and social interactions, which are deeply embedded in how time itself is valued and managed in that culture. Neither is right or wrong, just different.
And finally, another big one. Ignoring formal addresses, especially in cultures with strong hierarchies. In the U.S., it's perfectly normal, common even, to call your boss by their first name almost immediately. You might casually say, hey, John, could we grab a minute to discuss the report?
Very common. But in cultures like South Korea or China or many parts of Southeast Asia or even in more traditional sectors in Europe, you should almost always start by using titles and surnames, or sometimes even specific honorifics, especially when addressing superiors or elders. For example, Director Wang, could we perhaps set up a meeting sometime next week to discuss the project proposal? Or, Manager Kim, I just wanted to confirm the schedule for tomorrow's presentation. And this raises that profound question again. How does language directly reflect societal power dynamics, hierarchy, and respect? The choice of address is such a powerful indicator.
Tells you a lot about the culture.
It really does. In cultures with a strong hierarchical structure and what Hofstede called high power distance, using proper titles, surnames, and often more deferential language demonstrates crucial respect for position, age, and seniority. Failing to do so, defaulting to first names too quickly, can be seen as highly disrespectful, dismissive, maybe even arrogant. It can immediately damage your professional standing and credibility before you've even started talking business. It's such a small linguistic choice with potentially major cultural implications for how you are perceived and how effective your communication will ultimately be.
Wow. So the comprehensive key takeaway here is crystal clear. Cultural awareness is absolutely as important as linguistic accuracy when communicating professionally in English globally.
They go hand in hand. You can't separate them.
It's like the invisible bridge, isn't it? The thing that allows your professional English to truly connect, resonate, and succeed globally. It ensures your meticulously chosen words are not only understood but are also received with the precise respect, intent, and impact you actually wish to convey.
It's the difference between just speaking to someone from another culture and truly speaking with them, connecting on their terms as well as your own.
Building that bridge. Hashtag tag tag outro. So what does all of this mean for you, the learner out there, ready to conquer the global business stage?
Well, I think it means that truly mastering business English isn't just about sounding grammatically correct. It's about sounding effective, it's about sounding persuasive, and perhaps most importantly, it's about sounding profoundly culturally aware.
Mm-hmm.
We've journeyed through quite a lot today. The critical skills, how to make those stellar first impressions that really open doors, how to contribute confidently and collaboratively in meetings, the nuanced art of crafting emails that are perfectly polite and impactful.
A balance again.
And crucially, how to navigate the endlessly fascinating and, let's be honest, often surprising world of global cultural nuances in communication. We've definitely seen that even small, intentional shifts in phrasing, just choosing one word over another, coupled with a deep, informed understanding of diverse global communication styles, can profoundly elevate your professional presence and the ultimate success of your interactions. From just clarifying your specific role clearly in an introduction to diplomatically softening a disagreement in a really high-stakes meeting, or meticulously choosing the right email closing for the right person. Every single detail contributes to your overall professional image and the effectiveness of your message.
They're not just isolated tips, are they?
Not at all. They're intricately interconnected principles that, when you understand them and apply them together, build a truly comprehensive and formidable approach to professional communication.
And this is precisely where you come in. Your active engagement, your practice, is the final crucial step in making this deep dive really stick. So your challenge for this week, if you choose to accept it, is threefold. First, actively practice introducing yourself professionally, maybe even out loud. Try recording yourself on your phone saying, "Hi, I'm your name and I work as your job title at your company." Then listen back critically. Do you sound confident? Is your articulation clear? Pay attention to how clearly you state your name and role. Notice the subtle positive shifts in your voice when you really project confidence. The more you hear yourself sound professional, the more natural it will start to feel.
Great first step. Practice makes permanent.
Second, take a few minutes to draft a short business email, applying today's polite phrasing tips. Maybe imagine you're requesting some information from a colleague, or making a gentle follow-up on something. Focus especially on those opening and closing lines we discussed. For instance, try writing an email where you request information using phrases like, "I'd like to request," or "Would you be able to provide?" And make absolutely sure you close with a universally appropriate phrase like "best regards" or "kind regards." Then compare it. Notice how different it feels, how much more professional it reads, compared to maybe how you would have written it before. This conscious application really helps solidify your learning.
Applying it makes it real.
And third, and perhaps the most impactful challenge, this week, actively try to use just one new professional phrase, or perhaps apply one cultural insight we discussed in a real-world conversation or email. It could be in a team meeting, maybe during a casual chat with a colleague, or even in a networking discussion if you have one. Perhaps it's using, "From my perspective, I believe," when you share an opinion. Or maybe trying, "I see your point, but I have a slightly different perspective," when you need to disagree respectfully. The very act of applying these phrases in a live context, even if it feels a little awkward or scripted at first, will profoundly solidify your learning and build your confidence faster than anything else. Don't be afraid to experiment. Every attempt is a step forward.
Absolutely. And if we connect all of this to the much broader picture, maybe leave you with a final thought to mull over. Consider this. How might the conscious adaptation of your communication style, even in subtle ways, influence not just your immediate professional outcomes, getting that promotion, closing that deal, but also your broader understanding, your empathy, and your genuine appreciation of different cultures around the world?
Wow, yeah. Think about the powerful ripple effect of genuine, culturally sensitive, intercultural communication. It's not merely about successfully closing a deal or having a productive meeting, important as those are. It's potentially about fostering deeper global collaboration, building stronger international bridges, and significantly enriching your own worldview in the process. Each time you thoughtfully choose your words, considering both the language and the culture, you're not just speaking English better, you're engaging more deeply with a complex, vibrant culture. You're opening yourself to new ways of thinking and connecting on a more profound human level. That's a fantastic thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the powerful nuances of business English. Keep practicing, keep learning, and keep building those absolutely essential professional connections, one confident, culturally aware phrase at a time. We genuinely believe in your ability to master this and unlock new opportunities.
Until next time, continue to question, continue to explore, and always remember that every single interaction, every conversation, every email is a unique and valuable opportunity to refine your understanding of the world and your place within it.